Okay. Every gacha game eventually develops that one unit. The one character that somehow finds a way into every team. This is usually not because they're a damage dealer, not because they are even the flashiest character. It is usually because the teams seem to work perfectly when they are in the team. For Neverness to Everness, this unit is theyre. The ironic thing about this is that this has turned into one of the biggest problems the game has today. If you have reached endgame, then you have probably experienced this yourself. You have finished building up all your limited units, your modules are all ready, the arcs are leveled up, and the team is looking good. Suddenly, Beyond the Rails asks you for another team. That's when everything starts to become an issue. Not because your second team is weak or anything, but because multiple DPS units in NTE are currently fighting over the exact same support. It is like you have two sports cars but only own one set of keys. One team gets theyre, and the other team has to figure it out somehow. And that's where the problem really is. When one support becomes almost mandatory in multiple Beyond the Rails teams, it immediately starts affecting your whole account. This is where Iroi comes in. When she was first revealed in the livestream, many others and myself could only see the obvious parts of her kit. She has healing, she has resurrection, and of course, as every support, she has buffs as well. My mind started going, she replaces G1, or better yet, she's a premium healer for Shinku. But after all the testing I have done on the creator server, I think everyone, including myself, was asking the wrong question about Iroi. Because right now, I do not think her biggest contribution is replacing G1. I think she somehow solves one of the biggest problems an NTE has. If all this is true, Iroi might go down as one of the highest value supports that the game has ever released. Before we can understand Iroi, we first have to understand why theyre breaks the rules. I have a whole video on that, so I won't go into much detail here. The answer isn't damage or healing like I said. Theyre breaks the core combat system of the game. As normally Esper cycles take time to build up, you need field time, you need to attack and build up the gauge. Only after this can you trigger a reaction. It is the intended loop that we should go through when playing the game. The balancing mechanic that ensures damage takes time and reactions aren't constant or instant. Theyre skips the waiting, and because he is a Cosmos unit, he naturally fits well into most of the teams we have been able to build in the game so far. And this is exactly where I think I misunderstood Iroi, because at first I thought she was nothing like theyre. I honestly believe Hota was not trying to make another theyre at all. Perhaps they were doing something completely different. But somehow we have ended up in a situation where I can make this video. Going back to Iroi's kit. When she was first revealed, the discussion was simple. She is a healer that has resurrection and buffs the team. One of the biggest talking points was that she has refreshing Vita buds. So clearly she was meant to be a new support for Blossom. This isn't really a conclusion that is crazy to jump to. On paper, she is a classic support. Iroi keeps the team alive, makes Blossom somewhat stronger, possibly helps Shinku get stronger with more Blossom uptime for charged. Except, players did more testing, and something strange started to happen. Due to Iroi being released after Shinku, people needed a unit to hold down the fort. Everyone expected that it would be G1 to hold that position, but Nanally slotted right in. Now, there's a strange case for Nanally, and this is the part that shocked almost everyone. Nanally is a premium DPS, a character designed to be the centerpiece of her own team. She had good personal damage herself, but helped Blossom become even stronger as a rotation. So why was it that she was being used as a support? At first glance, this didn't even make sense. Surely someone could support Shinku better. Except the idea of her being a better support wasn't to do with damage. It sadly came down to timing. This was something that Iroi had to address first if she ever wanted to find herself getting into the Shinku team, or she would end up being used less just like G1. Because as it turns out, Nanally isn't in the Shinku team because she has strong supporting capabilities, but because the internal cooldown clocks seem to align perfectly with her kit. And once players understood why that timing worked, it was clear Iroi needed to have that similar timing. Now, after testing, I am here to say Iroi does not potentially free up Nanally, but she frees up both Nanally and the Zero. Now that changes the conversation completely. That changes the story from another healer entering the game, but to being a support that could quietly reshape our team building going forward. One thing I've noticed about Neverness to Everness is that one of its strongest interactions aren't always obvious. They aren't even in the ability description of the units. Some things you discover by watching replays and asking yourself, why does this rotation feel so much smoother than every other one? That's exactly what happened here. Shinku is a character that wants to trigger charge reactions as consistently as possible. Her entire kit rewards the momentum, the filling up of her special skill over and over. You want that exact rhythm. Attack, trigger the skill, repeat. That rhythm makes Shinku one of the most satisfying characters in the game when all things align. Every time Shinku wanted another trigger, Nanally was all but ready, and as Nanally was there, the rotation flowed well. We all concluded that Nanally was the best support for Shinku, but we were hoping Iroi could somehow fit in. It wasn't actually because Nanally was the strongest support, it was because she happened to solve the timing problem. And this is where I think we could slot Iroi right into this, and she changes the conversation entirely. When you look at Iroi, if you look beyond the healing, the resurrection, the regression, and look at her Vita Bard refresh mechanic, she generates a Vita Bard copy after 3 seconds. This copy blooms 20 Vita pistols, blooming one every 0.5 seconds. This is simple, yet is exactly the reason Nanally saw a rise. Her Vita pistol being every 1 second made the timing perfect. Now, Iroi fires every 0.5 seconds, which is 2 every second, so she also perfectly fits into the team. With Iroi in the team, you can then also meet the conditions for the 1 Vita Bard pistol internal cooldown. And that is it. Nanally has found a perfect substitute. Once you consider that Nanally was only in this team because of this perfect alignment, she had no other supporting capabilities. She was nothing but a victim of passive convenience. She can now fall into her own team, which is quite strong in its own right. Now, I know what you're thinking. Sure, she replaces Nanally, but how does she replace Zero? Well, the answer is nuanced and is based on the rotation she does. Now, I am not here to say Iroi is another Zero. Far from it actually. If you have read her kit, she has no instant cycle. That is still rather unique to Zero. What Iroi has, however, is a mechanic that makes it so that she can work from off-field and actually build up her cycle while you do something else with other units. Yes, you heard that right, we have our first off-field Esper cycle build unit. Now, I will caveat this by saying she doesn't fill up her own cycle 100%, but she fills it up enough that the rotation will feel smooth and won't feel forced, even without Zero. Also, the Esper cycle feel improves for her second rotation and for the third. Only the first rotation requires some setup, and after that it is smooth sailing. And that's exactly where everything changes. Because if Iroi can build her Esper cycle whilst she's off-field, she no longer needs Zero's biggest contribution. Instead of bringing theyre to speed up the rotation, Iroi quietly keeps the engine running herself. So, let's answer the question. How does Iroi build Esper cycle while off-field? This is a combination of both her imagination and her using imagination to summon Morpheus. If you're unfamiliar, she summons a sheep and sits on it when you hold her basic attack. This is when you hold her basic attack for the second time, but you can also do this by just holding her basic attack and not letting it go until she actually sits on Morpheus. When Morpheus is summoned, Morpheus unleashes sustained fire that deals anima damage. Now this sounds normal, but switching at the point that Morpheus is summoned ensures that the cycle keeps building while you are on another unit. That right there is game changing. The Esper cycle build-up is nothing to write home about. It gives you about 30 to 40% of the Esper cycle, which doesn't sound as impressive as the 100% instant cycle that theyre gives. But this is enough to fill up Iroi's Esper cycle when used in the proper rotation. I will be posting a rotation guide video, as I always do, just before the launch of Iroi on global, but as you can see from the background gameplay, this rotation works out perfectly. Iroi makes it so that Shinku doesn't need an exact theyre copy, or making it so Shinku does not need to borrow Nanally from another team. Honestly, I think this is far more valuable, because if the team requires 2 units that are already part of a working team for their team composition, that really isn't a solution. In fact, that is a temporary fix, a temporary stopgap. It would just be shifting the problem of theyre to another unit after every release. Cheese, Nanally, and Chaos already all demand theyre. Granted, you could argue that Cheese can do it solo, but if you want to work on a proper Blossom team for Cheese, theyre is needed. Now we have Shinku as well. Shinku also needs theyre, but Iroi changes that equation. All this happening while Shinku gains a dedicated support that naturally works well with the charge internal cooldown, while also opening a slot for an additional damage support like Hanyel or grouping using G1 or Sakiri, because with Nanally and theyre replaced by the Iroi, nobody loses and everyone actually benefits from this new unit. Our issue was always about roster allocation. This is something that Iroi quietly fixes. That's a much bigger contribution than simply replacing another support. One thing I want to emphasize is that I don't want this video to look like another character A versus character B debate. I do those videos and this is not one of them, as I believe I will be missing the point if I just do that type of video this time. Nanally is an absolute strong DPS. She still has a strong Blossom team that gets even stronger if you decide to throw Iroi in there. This is still a possibility if you have no love for the Shinku and just want to strengthen your Nanally team. G1 is also still an incredible sub DPS with amazing utility at that. Iroi does not in any way change this. theyre is also one of the strongest supports in the entire game. Iroi doesn't replace any of them, she simply changes how they fit together. Once I looked at Iroi's kit with everything I have now, buffing, resurrection, fast cycle, Vita Bard refresh, none of these mechanics exist in isolation. They come together to become one of the strongest supports whose contribution is more than just an increase in damage. At this point, we've established something important. Not only is Iroi not just another Blossom support, she changes one of NTE's biggest growing problems: roster congestion. As more characters release into the game, the more valuable the flexibility that Iroi brings to the table will become. If you have played gacha games for long, then you should know that the most valuable units in the long run are usually the supports. Those units aren't remembered because they have the highest multipliers, but are remembered because entire accounts change to revolve around them. And honestly, I believe Iroi has quite the potential to follow this exact same path. This will not be because she's overpowered, but because she is a problem solver. Sometimes the most valuable character isn't the one that makes one team incredible. It's the one that makes every team easier to build. Are you looking forward to Iroi? Have you been testing her as well? Have you found yourself using Zero less often? Or are you looking forward to using Zero less and freeing up the Nanally? Let me know down below. I read every comment, and discussions like these are often where big discoveries are made. Until the next time, I will see you in theyre.